Hello, everyone. Welcome to the El Calvario podcast. It's been a while since we last recorded. We took a bit of an extended break, I guess you could call it. But we're back, and hopefully we're back for a little bit longer. We have a different format that we'd like to try out for, I guess, this year. Let us know what you all think. But again, just thank you all for subscribing, for following the last year. And I encourage you all to just keep doing that. If you haven't already, just subscribe to the channel. So follow us on whatever podcast platform you listen on. And if there is one that we're not on yet, let us know and we can add it to that service. But quick intro out of the way. Just wanted to say we're back with Pastor. I know he's always busy, so sometimes he's here, sometimes he's not.
And we're starting out bad because immediately upon starting this, my notes went away and I'm looking for them now. But that's okay.
It always happens though.
Yep.
It always happens.
It really does.
But thank you for being here. How have you been?
I've been good, just running around a lot. We've had a lot to do in Illinois with the other Spanish churches and obviously our church. The end of the year, you have to tie up all the miscellaneous business, plus get everything ready for the next year to relaunch, which we just did about 2 weeks ago. And so, yeah, it's just been a lot of work, and now we got to work more. That's just kind of how it is.
And I was going to ask you, just I know every day's different, but what's like the day-to-day almost?
Well, the thing is, I used to have a more hardline schedule. I don't anymore because just one thing pours into the next, pours into the next. It used to be Sunday nights I wrote up a to-do list of everything I needed to do separated between the church and the district and my family. That doesn't exist. Now it's just hit things as I go and just keep going all week long. And yeah. It's been hard to kind of keep up with it all lately.
I was going to say, that sounds very tiring.
It is. Then that's the thing about ministry that nobody ever understands. It's not about getting up to preach or counsel here and there. It is just this week in, week out grind that, it just goes and you can't get off it. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I know you got some drink there, some Dr. Pepper to keep you awake.
From the Chick-fil-A in Lombard, the best Dr. Pepper there is.
I haven't tried it there, so I don't know. So like I was mentioning, we have a different format that we have planned for this podcast. We're thinking about maybe doing themes for a month, this or that. So before we get into today's topic, I did have just like a little bit of an icebreaker, I guess you could say, however you want to phrase it, basically, just to help us get into that topic. But this being the month, we're recording in February, by the way, this being the month of love, some would say, right? Do you remember that moment that you proposed to your now wife?
I did, but our proposal was weird in the sense of I had gone somewhere on a trip, actually a friend of mine's wedding. I came home and I told my parents that I wanted to marry my wife. I went and I talked to her father, got the permission and all that. So she knew, my memory might be a little off, but I remember them listening at the top of the stairs of the house while I talked to him. So she knew what was going on. And, I kind of feel like I fell into a trap because then I found out 2 weeks later they were going to look at dresses and she already had a dress, things like that. They already had their plan. So I didn't actually end up proposing till that would have been June. I didn't propose till maybe September, maybe. But we already had a date, we already had dresses, we already had everything. So at that point, the proposal was just, here's the ring, So, yeah, our proposal was strange.
And how, what made you think, now is the time to propose?
The thing is, the actual proposal or me deciding to marry her?
I guess you deciding.
Well, the thing is, I don't know what I was waiting for, what I thought the heavens needed to open up and say this is the one, because I already knew.
Yeah.
I already knew that she had met certain qualifications biblically and just personally. I knew all that. I don't know what I was waiting for, but I had gone to my friend's wedding, and a lot of different junk happened there. And I even said to him the day before his wedding, which I hope his wife doesn't watch this, I even told him, you're not married yet, you can get out. And his response was something to the effect of, I made a decision to love her. And so he just decided to go through with it. And for whatever reason, that set the light bulb off with me. I don't know what I've been waiting on. I made the decision. So I came home and I took care of it. And to be honest, I think I came home on a Saturday, maybe, and by Monday, I talked to my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was ready to go.
That's interesting. So then when you actually, so that was, you said earlier, like I guess in the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then September comes. Was it just like a random day out that you just said, oh?
Well, the thing is, I had purchased the ring.
Yeah.
And then I had to get it resized, which I remember that was delayed for some reason. That took a while. And so literally we were out together. We went to the mall. I don't know if she had gone to the bathroom or what, but she wasn't with me. So I go to the counter to pick up my resized ring. And so it was a ring box. It was kind of weird because it was tall. And so I have this tall ring box just in my pocket, like sticking out. We walk all over the mall, and I'm amazed that she hasn't noticed it. After that, we went to a park. There's a park in Lombard I used to like to go to. There's a hill. And anyway, I took her up there, and she's like, what are we doing here? And that's when I just got on my knee and pulled out the ring, which, by the way, pulling that out of my pocket took forever. So it kind of killed the romance of the moment. But,
that's always the interesting thing, is trying to hide the ring with the box. Because I remember when I proposed, I was thinking, do I need the box? Would it be more or less romantic if I don't have the box?
I mean, on TV and movies, they always have the box, but yeah.
So I remember when I did it, I was trying to hide the box from her. Yeah. Because we're going to the same thing, like we're going to a park. I found this like wooded area, or I don't want to make it seem like like, you know, somewhere scary, but just like a park with a bunch of trees. It was during the fall, so it was like different colors. I had it in my jacket pocket, and I remember like slipped out in the car. I was going out, so I was trying to like grab it and try to move it to the other pocket. And she was getting out of the car, like, "What are you doing? What are you waiting for?" It's like, oh. And there just happened to be like garbage on the side. Oh, I'm picking up this garbage from my car. I gotta go throw it out.
And how far behind you was your brother following you in the car?
He wasn't there yet.
Okay.
So that's another part of that story, is that my brother, I had asked him to be the photographer for that moment. So I told him, oh, this is the park I'm gonna be at. I'm gonna get here at this time if you want to get like 10, 15 minutes later. That way we don't show up at the same time, and she isn't like aware of what's going on, which I do think she had some sort of inclination. So then we get there. I had gone a few days before with my father, like, oh, looking what areas would be a good spot to do it. Yeah. I was like, all right, this is the spot we're gonna do it at. When I walk here, I'll stop, like, oh, we should take some pictures, this and that, and then I'll propose. That moment comes, I'm there, and I'm like freezing up a little bit, get nervous, and like, let's keep walking a little bit more. So I'm walking further away from the spot to the point where the way this trail works is it's like a bit of a wooded area.
What park was it?
It was in, I think, Lyle or Downers Grove.
Okay.
It's like a random little forest preserve. It's in the middle of a community.
Okay.
So that's why that you go through it and it leads out to like a street. Eventually, like a regular road. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I'm getting to the end of that, so I'm gonna have to turn back eventually. So as I'm turning back, I see my brother, because he's been following us, waiting, because he didn't know like when is he gonna do it. So I was like, oh, I started panicking, like, oh, she's gonna see him. So I take her away. So like we go further inside the woods, so that he goes around. We like go circling around each other. Then I go back to the spot, and then I do it. Okay. But I don't know. It was just. It's interesting.
Was your brother walking behind you, making noise, snapping twigs and things?
No, luckily, he was actually
This is totally on camera now.
He was surprised. I didn't even know he was there. Yeah. I was, it wasn't until I turned around that I saw him. I was like, oh, he's actually here. But yeah, I same thing. I pulled it out. It was in the box. Yeah. And she's like, oh, it was there the whole time. Yeah, I was holding it. But yeah, we're just talking about this because, again, February is always seen as like the month of love. Yeah. Right? And it's only because of Valentine's Day. So I figured, well, we might as well embrace that a little bit and talk about relationships, right? Marriage, dating, all of that stuff, because that all goes together. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit for this month, for the few weeks that we have. But before we even get into all of that, before we get into dating, marriages, relationship with your wife or your husband, I know like the one thing that I learned growing up is like the first thing you got to build is your relationship with God, right? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, God is the rock of our salvation. We know he's the chief stone of the corner. We know he needs to be the foundation of all things. So we understand that our identity is just tied up in our relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add in other things outside of just my identity of my peace and my joy is all tied up into that. David writes in the Psalms, which in the Psalms, you have to dig in to really get the understanding of it. But every good thing I have is from you. That included all his good qualities. So if I don't have God, I don't have the good qualities. I don't have the peace. I don't have joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I do get married, what are they marrying? Somebody who's empty, somebody without a foundation, somebody unstable, somebody without the peace and the joy, and all those things. So you need the relationship with God first.
And so how would you build that? Like if you,
Yeah.
I mean, in the best case scenario, you do this before you're dating, right? Before you even do that stuff. But let's say you're already dating.
Yeah.
Like how do you start building that relationship before?
Well, if you are already dating, if you're already, let's say, engaged, or maybe you're already married even, and you come to church, well, then you have an added pressure. It's doable, and it's in the Bible that it's doable, but you have the added pressure now because we're married, and now we're trying to realign things in our marriage to be biblical or engaged or whatever. And then at the same time, in the individual level, trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do personally to build this relationship with God? And so it does add a level of pressure, but it is doable. Everything in life is doable as long as somebody has enough determination.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally what it comes down to. It's not even necessarily about self-discipline, even though some people would kill me for saying that. It's not always about that. It is about somebody saying, I'm just going to keep trying. So, yeah, and so it is doable, but somebody just has to understand I got an extra burden on me because I didn't wait, you know. So you have to build up who you are in God, understanding what God's given you, and then from there, okay, let's work on the relationship.
So then in your own life, how exactly did that work for you? Like were you, I guess when you were dating your now wife, like you had build up that relationship, right, with God?
Yeah.
Before then, were you just, like how did you know you're ready, I guess, to start dating her?
Well, my story is kind of strange in the sense of I had dated other girls, and including one specifically that everybody in the world was like, this is the greatest thing on earth. You need to marry this one. Except I was miserable with her every time I was with her. We dated for, I don't know, a while. Well, it was less than a year, maybe 6 months. I don't know. But I was miserable. I mean, this sounds like an exaggeration. I literally had a knot in my back until the day I broke up with her. That's how miserable I was anytime I was with this woman. But everybody's like, she's great, she's great, she's great. And so it was after I broke up with her, one day I was praying, and I was kind of mad, you know, and I was complaining to God. And I'm like, all right, I don't get it. All right, I've dated this girl, dated blah, blah, blah. This just isn't working. And now this one, everybody told me is the one. This is the greatest thing on earth, except I'm miserable with her. What's going on? Everybody told me this was great. And not that I heard an audible voice or anything, but I felt from God, it's great, you listen to everybody else, but you don't know what I look for in a woman. Oh, so then I went into the Bible, specifically New Testament, getting it 1st and 2nd Peter, looking at the verses in Timothy, in the epistles written to Timothy, and especially the book of Proverbs, and just finding little qualities of what a biblical woman is, or what a woman who pleases God is, and what she does and all that. So I didn't write it down, but I had it in my head. And then there was one day, specifically on a Wednesday night, I was on the sound system, and I wasn't really paying attention, to be honest. So I was praying, you know, where, all right, God, I got the list. That's great. I haven't found anybody. And I looked around the church, and I'm like, well, not that one, not that one, not that one. And then I saw my wife. She was the last one in the altar still. And so that in and of itself, that's a sign of a godly woman, to be a worshiper, and to be a worshiper who can worship on her own. And then she starts walking back, and then my brain went off with my list. Well, actually, she has this. She had the whole list. And so that's kind of how I knew, okay, she's the one. Now, that being said, I had my own junk I needed to work out to kind of put things together to be able to get married. But nonetheless, I kind of knew right away. Yeah.
I think it's always been interesting. People always think like, oh, when is the right time?
Yeah.
Right? When is the right time to start dating? When is the right time when I should be looking for my spouse, right?
Yeah.
My husband, my wife, this and that. But yeah, it's definitely just seeking God first, right?
Yeah.
Just looking out to Him, building that relationship with Him first, and then kind of from there that grows on to like, you'll know.
Yeah.
It's very, I know everyone says this, it's very stereotypical, like you'll know when you know, but it kind of is like that, right?
Yeah, it is pretty much true.
I know in my personal experience, there was also the similar case.
Yeah.
In my mind, I always thought, well, I need to fix these things in my life before I do that, right?
Yeah.
I got to have this, and that. In my mind, I always wanted to have a certain amount of money, a stable job.
Yeah.
I wanted to be done with school because I was like, if I'm in school, I'm not going to have time for both, and I'm also just not going to have the money.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if people ever say this, but dating can be pretty expensive.
It is. It's very expensive.
Just going out to eat, buying things, just being out, right? It's money.
You got to buy coffees and ice cream. Everything's $8 now.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah.
So these things I thought about like beforehand. I was like, all right, I got to have some sort of money before I can date anybody.
Yeah.
Or else I'm just like, what are we doing then? But yeah, eventually the time came like, all right, well, I guess now is the time.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. But again, it's building off of that relationship with God, right? I just think that's very fundamental to all of this, and something that maybe people want to skip sometimes even.
They do, because, you have to be able to lead yourself before you get married. There's a reason, and I might be being a little too literal in the scripture, but nonetheless, the Bible does say marriage is between a man and a woman. And, that denotes or calls our attention to the concept that they're fully mature. Now, nobody's ever fully mature. We're always growing. We're always getting better. But nonetheless, the concept's there. You got to be able to take care of yourself first. And that goes for the man and the woman. Because, and you can go to Genesis 2, what is that, verse 15, 16, 17. God makes Adam, puts him in the garden, puts him to work, gives him the word of God first before he gets Eve. And so from right there, we have a scriptural precedent. You need to have some stuff together. Doesn't mean everything worked out, but you at least got to be able to say, I'm a man now. I'm taking care of myself. And on the flip side, and this could desviar, I can't think of that word in English very quickly, but...
Like deviate?
Yeah, if a woman doesn't want to be treated as a daughter and doesn't want to be dominated, then maybe she should be prepared as well as a fully functional woman before they get married. Because if not, then you're going to have this weird dynamic of he's advanced or she's not, or the opposite, which is even worse. Those marriages are always the biggest mess, when she was already mature and stable and whatever, and then she married a man-child, and it just doesn't work. The whole structure of the home falls apart. So you need to be able to be a functioning adult.
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah.
So then going off of a little bit of that, like just building that relationship with God and going according to the Word of God, what would you say, like, I almost want to say like broad, just qualities that a biblical man would be in a biblical woman? Like what qualities would kind of each sex want to look out for? Well,
a biblical man, what's funny is that it's the same quality, except it's implemented in different ways. One of the most basic tenets of Christianity, which we maybe overlook, is a distrust of self. In other words, I don't give myself a whole lot of space to do what I want to do because it'll end up bad. Okay? So, one of the basic tenets of Christianity is I need to have self-control, which we get through the Holy Ghost. That's actually the whole point of the freedom of the Holy Ghost, is that I'm not submitted to my flesh now. Okay? So, I have the Holy Ghost. I am a fully functional adult. That means I can control some things. With a man, in general, that means controlling temper, time, and sex. Typically, a man, if he can learn to control these things in his life, then he will have a good marriage. if he, I'll go backwards. Obviously, the sex thing. When you get married, there's only one woman there. Pornography can't help. Nothing else. Nope. Only my wife. So I got to start working on that, which is kind of an easy fix for most guys because, truthfully, you put some apps on your phone, it's taken care of. As far as the time goes, men, there's a joke by Bill Burr, which I probably shouldn't mention on a church podcast, but he always makes a joke how women can get mad at men for celebrating stuff that's so stupid. In particular, he was talking about football. And guys like to waste time a lot, whether it's video games or TV or whatever, which you can do as long as you're taking care of business on the other end, right?
Yeah.
And then the temper. Every man has a temper to a certain degree. We're made in the image of God. God has a temper too. Maybe people would not like that I say that, but the Bible's clear. He does. He gets angry. Now men deal with that temper in different ways. They explode or they implode. And especially as times have changed, more men implode and they burn inside themselves and frustrated. So if you can learn to deal with these things in your life, yeah, you'll be pretty good as a husband because it's going to be there. You're going to have to watch your time even more when you get married because now you really don't have free time. Your temper can come out. Sometimes as a man, it'll just be a tone of voice. Well, now I got to watch even my tone of voice. Yeah. And obviously, once again, the sex thing, I got to be careful there. So on the men's side, it's that. So your self-control is put in place in those areas. Now, the woman, in general, is going to be a twofold in the sense of all women have emotions, and just in general, they're taught my emotions are what we go by. No, we don't have to go by that. And what's funny, in spite of how much that idea is out there, just 2 generations before of our mothers didn't behave that way. They had emotions, but they always got their stuff done. They always took care of the kids. They never went on strike because they were having an emotional bout. There was none of that. So, but that exists now. Well, because I feel this way, I don't go to work. I feel this way. You have been, by acting that way, you're telling me you're immature because any functional adult takes care of their own emotions so they can go do what they need to do. And then the second thing for the woman, which requires self-control, is communication. It is a fallacy that women communicate better than men. Anybody can tell me they can do whatever studies they want to do, but that is an absolute fallacy. Because they talk more doesn't mean they communicate more. Because a man is quieter in general at home, that doesn't mean that she automatically is communicating more. No, she's talking a lot. She'll tell about it. But women have an issue of something bothers them and then they don't say it. And if you don't have the maturity or the self-control to say, all right, this bothered me, whether it's big or small, so I'm going to go talk about it to my spouse. If you don't do that, the Bible literally talks about not letting the sun go down on your anger. You end up in situations where, all right, she's got a problem, she's not expressing it directly, and a man being, I should probably change that phrase, a man not having emotional intelligence doesn't pick up on her face and her tone of voice and just the way she walks in the house. He doesn't realize that she's communicating without communicating. And so what ends up happening is we live in an armistice situation. First World War ended in an armistice. We just agreed to stop fighting. Yeah. The problem was still there. That's, not to get into all that political stuff, but that's how we end up at the Second World War. You got to take care of stuff when it comes up, but that requires somebody being mature enough to speak, which the Bible puts on the offended party to go to reconcile. So, again, it is either side. It's going to be self-control, but it's implemented different ways depending on the sex.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's something that comes up. I know here at our church we have, for those that are engaged, which currently I am, we go through a marriage course, right? Called Love and Respect. And that's kind of like the reoccurring thing there, right? Of just communicating and making sure whatever You're
Yeah.
feeling whatever's going on, that the other person knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Or else you end up in what the thing calls the crazy cycle.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also very interesting. It's
Mm-hmm.
just you never. I guess just it's something that's simple.
Yeah.
It can just grow exponentially.
yeah.
I guess.
You know, there's I actually, when we do love and respect, I normally tell this story just because it was funny because I had to go babysit this particular couple when they were dating. I had to be the chaperone, and I don't know. I don't think I was 18 yet, and I was still just having to sit with them. So I went out with them on every date they went on, and she always had a small complaint, and that's the thing. That's the key word. It was small.
Yeah.
It would always be like, there's too many bubbles in the ice in my water, or, you know, whatever. They put mustard on my plate, or no matter where we went, she complained.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to one restaurant. Now, this had been going on, bunch of little things, but he's not expressing, he's not communicating on his end, and she on her end is not understanding that he is trying to take her out on nice dates and paying money that, you know, he was working extra, I recall, to be able to pay for these dates. And on his end, he's like, I can't make her happy. She's never thankful. On her end, I still don't exactly know, other than the fact that maybe she is just picky and wasn't thinking about what was coming out of her mouth. And anyway, we go out to eat one day, and I remember we're at the table. We had just ordered the food, and I'm sitting there, and that's what I always did. I was a terrible chaperone because I would just look down and just do my own thing.
Yeah.
And she picked up a spoon, and it had like water spots on it. And she started to complain about, we need to get the waiter to get us new silverware. And he just blew up. And I don't know if he had silverware or whatever, but whatever he had on his hand, he threw down. He's like, can't you ever just be happy? And then he went to his car and left us there alone. So I had a date with his fiance. It was very awkward. But that's what happens in marriage. If you don't just say, hey, you know, I've been trying to take you to a nice restaurant, and everywhere we go, you got a complaint. If you don't find a way to express that, which I realize is awkward, you end up letting it fester and then blowing up like that dude and just literally leaving her at a restaurant. Yeah. And a lot of marriage is just that. You got to learn to talk.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly, it's always just the tough part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just maybe a little bit of ego, if you're just not wanting to share, or I don't know. But that's always been like just a tough part to do, is just opening up, saying, hey, I have a problem here.
Yeah.
This is something that we're dealing with that maybe you may not be aware of, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. And then sometimes the things really are just small.
Yeah.
And so you feel extra dumb bringing it up, but if it's persistent, then you got to take care of it. And so, yeah, you just got to learn how to talk. You have to make that happen, because if not, people end up together and separate. You know, which always, I will say this one thing, and I realize I'm a little cold about some things in the sense of emotions are real, but they can't make the decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And I might have emotion for this girl I'm dating or whatever. We feel some sort of emotional connection. That's great. But if we have unresolved fights and we're just dating and we're together but separate mentally and emotionally, what are we doing? Why do we keep putting on the front? Let's just end this and move on. Because obviously, what's the point? But a lot of people do that, and they do it. They would say they do it because of fear of loneliness, or I don't believe that's really the case. I think it's just people get into maintenance mode. It's here already. What do you mean I need to go get a new car? Well, your brakes aren't working on this car anymore. That's why. And so just human nature in general would rather put money or effort into a losing effort rather than try something new, which, yeah, a lot of people fall into that.
So there's a lot to just talk about with relationships and dating and marriage, and we didn't even, I think, scratch the surface of all of this. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about these next few weeks here. I know next week we'll focus a little bit more on kind of the role of a husband and the role of a wife, but I think today we kind of learned a few key things. Is just, before anything, you got to have that relationship with God. Yeah. Right? You got to have that relationship before seeking anything else out. You got to build that foundation there. The second thing, dating is expensive.
It really is.
it's and I don't say it to be like, oh, why is it so much? It's just something to keep in mind, right? Just something to remember. Sometimes you can get lost in like, oh, I want to be with this person. I want to be with this person.
Yeah.
But they don't take into the fact there's other things that you got to think about too.
Yeah.
Not just being with the person. You got to think about finances. You got to think about travel. Think about, all right, well, who's going to be with me as well?
What are they getting in this bargain? Are you winning or is she winning? Or are you both winning?
So there's more than just, I want to date this person.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, this is just the beginning of what we have for the rest of this month and really kind of the format that we're going to go for this year. So let us know what you all think. I know we could have kept going a lot longer. We've done so previously.
I can ramble. I can really ramble.
But I think we'll stop here because this is just a good stopping point. But again, thank you all for joining us, for listening. Thank you, Pastor, for being here, giving us some words, some more advice. And again, don't forget to subscribe, follow us in whatever podcast platform you have. If you want to watch us in video format, if you want to see our faces, I don't know why you would, but if you want to, we're on YouTube, so you can watch us there. But again, thank you all, and until next time.